On June 18th, 1812, the United States made a choice that split the nation down the middle and launched an invasion. The United States declared war on Britain on June 18th, 1812, jumping directly into the wider Napoleonic Wars raging across Europe. Opinion in the U.S. was split on how to respond. Although majorities in both the House and Senate voted for war, they were divided along strict party lines. The Democratic-Republican Party stood heavily in favor, while the Federalist Party stood firmly against. This conflict was initiated by the United States against the United Kingdom and its allies, fought mainly in North America and at sea. American leaders looked across the Atlantic at British maritime policies and saw an intolerable assault on sovereignty. Sailors were seized from American merchant ships, and cargoes were intercepted as Britain tried to strangle Napoleon's continental empire. Yet the vote in Washington proved that the young American republic was marching to war with itself. Half the legislature warned that the nation's fragile economy and tiny military could not possibly survive a collision with the globe's ruling naval power. The other half insisted that national honor left no other choice. As the declaration was signed, ships in Atlantic harbors prepared to weigh anchor, and troops began mustering near the northern border, stepping blindly into a transatlantic storm. The fighting spilled across a vast continent and deep into the open ocean. At sea, American frigates clashed with the Royal Navy, while on land, armies marched back and forth across the Canadian frontier. But the conflict was far from a simple two-nation duel. Indigenous nations across the continent found themselves forced to navigate the storm, choosing alliances that offered the best hope of protecting their ancestral lands from relentless American expansion. In the Southeast, those complex struggles erupted into devastating internal and external combat. American forces and allied indigenous groups squared off against the Red Stick faction of the Muskogee. The fighting in the Creek country was fierce, unrelenting, and fundamentally reshaped the geography of power in the American South. Entire communities were torn apart by ideological divides over how to respond to encroaching white settlement. For months, the Southeastern theater consumed resources and lives, drawing little attention from the stalled campaigns in the North, yet proving just as brutal. While diplomats whispered in European capitals and peace feelers drifted across the Atlantic, the war on the ground took on a terrible local momentum, driven by competing visions of who would own the soil of North America. Then the ground shifted beneath the American Republic. In April 1814, Napoleon abdicated his throne in Europe, bringing a sudden end to years of continental deadlock. For the British Empire, the collapse of the French Emperor meant one monumental thing. A vast professional military machine was suddenly free. Britain wasted no time pivoting its immense resources toward North America. Troop transports crossed the Atlantic carrying hardened veterans who had fought across the Iberian Peninsula against the best of France's armies. The naval blockade tightened around American ports, and strategic planning in London shifted from a defensive posture to an aggressive offensive campaign designed to punish the rebellious former colonies. American leaders in Washington, who had spent years struggling to capture Canada, suddenly found themselves facing an empire that was no longer distracted by Europe. The strategic balance of the war inverted almost overnight. Outnumbered garrisons along the frontier and coast braced themselves as word arrived of the Redcoats' arrival. The conflict entered a far more dangerous phase, where the survival of the United States hung not on tactical skill, but on whether the young nation could withstand the full, unbridled weight of the British military apparatus. With those newly freed veterans pouring across the Atlantic, British forces launched a direct strike at the heart of the American government. In August 1814, an expeditionary force pushed inland and achieved what few thought possible. They captured and burned Washington, sending the federal government fleeing into the countryside as smoke billowed over the presidential mansion and the Capitol. The national humiliation was absolute. President James Madison and his cabinet were scattered, and the young republic's administrative center was left a charred ruin of blackened stone and ash. Yet even as the smoke cleared over the Potomac, the war's momentum began to fray at the edges. British commanders pushed north toward Baltimore, only to find themselves checked by American defenders at Fort McHenry. The strategic reality was that burning a capital city did not necessarily break a nation's will to fight. Both sides were growing weary of a conflict that had dragged on with staggering financial costs and little permanent territorial gain for either crown or republic. Diplomats gathered across the ocean in Europe, seeking a way out of a war that had started over maritime rights and evolved into a bloody stalemate. Unbeknownst to the soldiers tightening their lines on both sides, the ink was already drying on a document that would render the upcoming carnage entirely unnecessary. In December 1814, diplomats meeting in Europe formally agreed upon peace terms in the Treaty of Ghent. Messengers loaded copies of the treaty onto fast ships, racing across the winter Atlantic to carry the news to North America. But in an era dependent on wind and sail, news traveled only as fast as a wooden hull could cut through the waves. While diplomats celebrated in Europe and ships plowed westward through icy seas, the war in North America reached its bloodiest crescendo. In the Deep South, Andrew Jackson's army prepared for a massive British assault on New Orleans. Jackson gathered a ragtag force of regular soldiers, frontiersmen, free men of color, and local militias, digging in behind mud parapets south of the city. On January 8, 1819, on January 8, 1815, British columns marched across an open sugarcane field in precise, traditional European formation. The resulting battle was a devastating slaughter for the attacking redcoats. Jackson's riflemen unleashed a relentless wall of lead that shattered the British advance in less than an hour. It was a stunning, lopsided tactical victory that electrified the American public. There was only one terrible problem. The Treaty of Ghent had already been signed weeks earlier. The greatest American battlefield triumph of the war had been fought entirely after peace terms were agreed upon, because no one on the battlefield knew the war was already over. Even after the peace treaty was signed, the official conclusion of the conflict took weeks more to wind through the clumsy machinery of government. The war did not officially end until the peace treaty was ratified by the United States Senate on February 17, 1815. When the news finally settled over the country, Americans looked back on a conflict that had achieved almost none of the grand territorial ambitions its architects originally dreamed of. Canada remained British, and the borders of the United States shifted very little. Yet the psychological and political landscape of the nation had transformed completely. The Federalist Party, which had opposed the war from the start and even whispered of secession at the Hartford Convention, was utterly discredited and vanished from national politics. Furthermore, impressment largely ceased after 1815, not because Britain formally renounced its maritime claims in the treaty text, but because the end of the Napoleonic Wars removed Britain's wartime manpower emergency. The Royal Navy no longer needed to drag sailors off foreign decks to man its fleets. Still, the underlying maritime disputes did not entirely vanish into history. Later Anglo-American friction over the stopping, visiting, searching, and seizure of American vessels continued in narrower contexts, especially as anti-slave trade enforcement grew on the high seas. Rare American allegations of post-war impressment even surfaced occasionally in diplomatic correspondence during the 1820s, proving that old habits of the world's oceans died very hard indeed. The War of 1812 closed out a generation of survival and defined the borders of a restless republic. Next, burning of Washington, and it starts with a federal city abandoned to smoke and the frantic escape of a president. The series runs in order. Subscribe so you don't start in the middle.